بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. We carry on today, brothers and sisters, in our series on Fiqh of Tahara, and we left off speaking about the nullifiers of al-wudoo or al-hadath al-asghar. And we spoke about several things up until now, such as al-kharij min as-sabilayn, what is passed through the two, from the private part and the backside, and what is exited from other than them two, that is repulsive. We talked about also sleep or losing of consciousness. We also talked about touching the private parts, or touching the opposite gender, and we spoke about eating the meat of camel as well. And that's what we finished with pretty much up until now. And today, inshallah, we will continue on to the next nullifier that is discussed by the ulama of Islam, and that is riddah or apostasy. So it'll be the seventh, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the seventh nullifier that we will be speaking about up until now, that is riddah. So riddah obviously takes place in many forms according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, whether it is verbally, like somebody abusing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, swearing at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or the malaika, wal-'iyadhu billah, or seeking aid from other than Allah, in which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can help you in, or what only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can grant, or for somebody to verbally claim that they know ilm al-ghayb, the unseen. And there's also a riddah bil-fi'l, or by action, and that is somebody committing a physical action which makes them leave the fold of Islam, such as performing sorcery or magic, a sihr, or somebody insulting the Quran by, for example, stepping on it, wal-'iyadhu billah, or throwing it in the washroom or the toilet or something, or making a dhabh li ghayrillah, sacrificing or slaughtering for other than Allah. And there's also riddah by i'tiqad, or by beliefs, and that is somebody holding a belief that constitutes apostasy. For example, like al-istihlal, somebody believing something that is proven qat'iyyan min ad-din to be haram, and they believe it is halal, or something that is halal, they believe it is haram. Like, for example, believing that the act of a zina or the action of qawm Lut is halal. And this would be kufr even if somebody never even does the action, but simply believing in it would make the person apostate from Islam. Or on the other hand, if someone were to say as-salat or al-hijab or Sawm Ramadan, for example, they are not wajib or obligatory in Islam. And once again, even if the person themselves were to pray, to fast, and to wear hijab, then it still would be a riddah, apostasy, simply by believing it. And then there's also riddah that comes in the way of a tark, or leaving something, which is, for example, leaving the salat, tarik salat, according to a mas'ala that is khilafiyya between the ulama, but according to an opinion amongst the scholars, which appears to be the more correct opinion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, that the one who leaves the salah has disbelieved or apostated. Or likewise, somebody who leaves the hukm of Allah, like a qadi or a hakim, leaving hukm Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, also would constitute apostasy. And the riddah also comes in the way of a shak, or doubting. If someone were to doubt matters of the deen, this would also constitute disbelief. For example, someone doubting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, or doubting that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the messenger of Allah, or so on. Now, the mas'ala we're talking about today, because obviously our durus are in the Fiqh of Tahara, we're speaking about it. Does a riddah nullify wudoo? Is that considered to be a hadath? If a Muslim falls into apostasy or apostates from Islam, does this yubtul al-wudoo? Does this nullify their tahara? And I just want to reword that, just for the sake of people who maybe, just so it's not misunderstood, and also specifically for people that suffer from al-waswas. It's not talking about somebody who may have by mistakenly done something or fell into a kufr, and they never disbelieved. They never held the title of kafir, but they mistakenly said something or did something unintentionally, or they had either bil-jahl or bil-ta'weel or something. This is not what we're speaking about. We're talking about somebody blatantly apostating from Islam. Okay? Can you just keep the level down? Now, why is this mas'ala important? Why would you guys think it's important to know if a riddah nullifies al-wudoo? Logically speaking, if somebody birtad an Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, why would it be important to know if it nullifies their wudu or not? Do you think if somebody became murtad, they're concerned about salah? Why is it important to know? Because they can come back to Islam. Obviously, the person that becomes murtad and he doesn't come back to Islam doesn't really care. It's not of any importance. And that person has something very major ahead of them Yawm al-Qiyamah when they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the hisab. But why it's important is that if somebody falls into apostasy, riddah, and they come back to Islam, they regretted it, they felt they did something wrong, and they want to come back to Islam. So if this person was on wudoo, they did apostasy, and then they want to come back to Islam, is their wudoo still valid? This is the mas'ala we want to focus on today. So the first opinion amongst Ahl al-Ilm with this regard is that riddah nullifies the wudoo, and this is the opinion held by the Hanabila and some of the Malikiyya, as well as some of the Shafi'iyya, and it was chosen by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And this opinion, they say that a riddah apostasy, it nullifies wudoo. And they use to support their opinion the phrase of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَقَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ وَإِلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبَطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ وَلَتَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ, which is in Surah Zumar. And it's been revealed to you and the prophets before you that, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it has been revealed to you and the prophets before you that if you associate partners with Allah, your deeds will become void and vain and lost, and you will be amongst the losers. And similar to that is the verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, وَمَن يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ. And whoever disbelieves in Iman, then his deeds are void and null. And as we discussed before, Al-Iman and Islam, when they're mentioned separately, they hold the meaning of the other. So, whoever disbelieves in Islam, then his deeds are null and void. So, according to the ulama, the oldest opinion, they say that if somebody were to become murtad, then their deeds are lost, they're void, they're nullified, they're done. And wudu obviously is a deed. So that being said, their wudu would be void and nullified by the riddah or the apostasy that they fell into. The opposing group respond to this, and they say that the deeds of one who apostates become void and in vain only if one dies a murtad. Not if he returns back to Islam. If he returns back to Islam, then his deeds are also returned back to him. And they use the following verse to support their rebuttal, which is وَمَن يَرْتَدَّ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ فَيَمُتْ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ حَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. In Surah Al-Baqarah. Whoever returns back from his religion and becomes a murtad and dies a disbeliever, and this is the important part, that he dies a disbeliever, then his deeds will become lost and void in this life and in the life after. and they'll be among the dwellers of Jahannam, the hellfire, forever. And this is also an important thing to know about apostasy, and how evil and filthy of a sin it is for one to apostate from Islam. This shows the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how He wants everyone and invites everyone to turn back to Him Jalla Jalaluh. And the enormous, the great, very vast opportunities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers His ibad, His khalq, to return back to Him, no matter how big or evil or filthy the sins they have done are. So the verse, وَمَن يَرْتَدَّ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ فَيَمُتْ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ, meaning if one becomes a murtad but doesn't die in that status, rather he comes back to Islam, then the deeds will not be lost and they will not be void. And if one becomes a murtad and dies in the state of kufr, then that's when the deeds are lost. And this is a side issue, and it's also one that has dispute as well, but it's very important without a doubt. And it's important for this issue that we're discussing, namely the issue of riddah. So we're going to just touch on it a little further. So the first opinion, as we're saying, they hold the view that somebody who apostates and comes back to Islam, then his tahara or his wudoo is nullified. And they mentioned the two verses that we stated, which is Surah Al-Ma'idah, and the first one was in Surah Al-Zumar. And they said that wudoo is part of those deeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in those ayat that the deeds will be null and void, and wudoo obviously is a good deed. Therefore, their good deed of al-wudoo would be null and void by committing apostasy. Because if the deeds are lost, then the wudoo would obviously be amongst them. So we said that the opposing opinion responded to it by saying this is only restricted to if one becomes murtad and he dies in the state of kufr. Then his deeds would be nullified. And if he comes back to Islam, then his wudoo, or then his deeds rather, aren't lost, and amongst those deeds would be his wudoo, meaning that it's still intact. So a side issue here, brothers, is that are a murtad's deeds lost even if he returns to Islam before dying? Some ulama, they discuss this, and there's dispute regarding this. Is a murtad's deeds lost when he apostates, even if he comes back to Islam? Meaning there's a Muslim, he apostated, they say, does he lose all of his deeds, and then when he comes back to Islam he has to start fresh? Or is it only void if he dies in the state of kufr? Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam al-Shawkani, and held later by Shaykh al-Shinqiti rahimahullah, wa rahimahullah al-Jami', they chose the opinion that al-riddah only nullifies al-tahara or al-wudoo if one dies a kafir. If someone fell into riddah and came back to Islam, then his previous deeds will be returned to him. And why is this? Naam ya akhi?
What about like if someone sins, if they go out of Islam and they come back, are they gone to it, or still there?
If somebody sins?
No, somebody has sins,
Naam.
and then they go out of Islam, and then they come back, and the sin's still there.
So we know in the hadith, so the question of the brother is if somebody, he has sins and then he apostates and then he returns to Islam, is his sin still there? Is that your question? So according to the hadith that we know, it's very popular, that Islam erases everything that came before it, right? Where most of us are familiar with this narration from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The ulama, they say that this is, it has a condition to it, and that is that the person leaves the sins that he's doing when he embraces Islam. Okay? For example, if there is somebody who is muqtala bi smoking cigarettes, they smoke cigarettes, okay, then they embrace Islam, Islam will erase all their sins. And it'll erase his sin of smoking cigarettes if he leaves that sin of smoking. If he continues on smoking after embracing Islam, the ulama say, and wallahu a'lam, this is to be the more correct view, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, the ulama say that he holds those sins until he leaves it. But if the person makes tawbah from it afterwards, then it's erased. Because we also know that tawbah erases everything that came before it as well. Right? So if somebody's a murderer and they enter into Islam, but they're still a murderer, they're still gaining those same sins. They never made tawbah from that Islam. You know? So if they were to leave those sins upon embracing Islam, then yes, it'll be erased. If they don't, then they're still going to hold the weight of those sins until they make tawbah from it. Is that clear? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وَمَنْ يَرْتَدَ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ فَيَمُتُ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. The verse stipulates two conditions: that the person becomes a murtad, an apostate, and that he dies in a state of kufr. And it isn't speaking about, according to the ulama that oppose the first view, it isn't speaking about the one who returns to Islam, okay, that didn't die in the state of kufr or riddah. And Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he concluded, or he states that the other three ulama, the other three a'immah of the four madhahib, which is Abu Hanifa, Malik, and Imam Ahmad, in one of two opinions, adopt that a person's deeds nullify on the spot with riddah, and they will not be returned to him. If he comes back from Islam, they say, those three a'immah, if he comes back to Islam, then he has to start over again. And he's starting fresh, and he lost all those deeds that he did. And the proof they use is لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبَطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ. If you commit shirk, your deeds will be lost and void. However, it does appear that Imam al-Shafi'i's opinion is the more correct opinion in this bab, because al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, what he did is he did jama' between the nusus, and this is something that is encouraged. We obviously are supposed to reconcile between all the texts wholly without excluding anything in order to come out with the most correct view from the Sharia. So, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he took into consideration with the verses that these ulama used, okay, and the one mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, to show that it's only if the person dies in a state of kufr. That's what it's referring to. And if one were to come back to Islam, then his deeds will also be returned to him. Excuse me. So, those are the ayat that we mentioned, the one in Surah Al-Zumar and then the one in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And the opposing opinion, the ulama, they responded by saying that that is clear. I don't need to go into that anymore and repeat anymore. That's pretty clear, inshallah, I hope. The second proof or dalil that they use to support their opinion, the ones that say that yes, riddah nullifies the wudoo, is a hadith in Sahih Muslim in which Rasulullah says, الطهور شطر الإيمان والحمد لله تملأ الميزان وسبحان الله وبحمده والحمد لله تملأان أو until the آخر الحديث. I don't need to go to the rest of it, but the shahid or the point we're trying to take is الطهور شطر الإيمان, that purification is part of faith or half of faith. And there's a khilaf between some of the narrations that's mentioned. Some mentions at-tuhuru, some say at-tahuru, meaning that on the ta there's either a fatha or a dhamma. A slight variation in the grammar there. Anyhow, the hadith, it's saying that purity or purification is half of faith. So how is this a proof that riddah nullifies wudu? Does anybody have an idea? How would they use this as a dalil that riddah nullifies wudu? الطهور شطر الإيمان. Any idea? No.
It's a form of disbelief.
It's a form of disbelief. So, elaborate a little bit further.
It takes away from the fold of Islam, so you have to come back and enter.
And because طهور شطر الإيمان, kind of, you're cancelling it out. صح? That's what you're getting to. So the hadith says that tahara, or cleanliness or purification, is half of faith. And riddah nullifies what? Faith, as you have said. So it nullifies an iman. The hadith is saying that wudu is part of iman, shatr al-iman. So if the iman is nullified, that means that what's nullified along with it? Al-wudu, or tahara. So that's the first opinion and the proof of the ulama to support it. The second opinion fil bab is that riddah does not nullify wudu, and this is the opinion of the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, and it's also, or it appears to be the madhab of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, and a second opinion in the Maliki madhab, and also an opinion held by Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah. And the first proof they gave of this opinion, by saying that riddah does not nullify wudu, is the weakest proof that they have altogether. And that is that they use the hadith that says, لا وضوء إلا من صوت أو ريح. That there is no wudu that's necessary except from hearing a sound or detecting a smell. And this is obviously, we spoke about this hadith earlier on when we talked about other nullifiers of wudu. But why would this be a very weak argument or dalil to use? They're saying that this hadith proves that riddah does not nullify wudu. Why? Because there's no wudu except from hearing a sound or detecting a smell. What is this hadith referring to? Passing wind. Somebody passing wind or emitting wind. Alright? So why is it a weak hadith to use to support that riddah does not nullify wudu?
Is the hadith specific?
Because then you would also say that urination, to urinate and to defecate and to eat camel meat and all this other stuff, and to sleep and all this, and touching the private part, and also doesn't nullify wudu because it's not mentioned here. Okay, so that is without a doubt a weak proof to use to support their opinion here, because this hadith is speaking specifically to one of the nullifiers of wudu. And we obviously know that the nullifiers of wudu aren't limited to just passing wind, okay? And the hadith also comes in a very specific context, which is during the salah. When somebody is in prayer, and they're having shak or doubt, did they pass wind or not? This is the hadith. This hadith is addressing this matter in specific. That somebody shouldn't leave their salah simply from doubt. If they having doubt that if they pass wind or not, rather they should only leave if they hear a sound to confirm it or detect a smell to confirm it. Okay? Some of the ulama also may respond to this hadith, and they say that this hadith is talking about one of the most minor nullifiers of the wudu, which would also encompass the ones that are a little bit greater, such as someone urinating, that they shouldn't make wudu until they're certain that they urinate or defecate and so on. And it would encompass what's more greater than that, and obviously riddah would be a lot greater than that. Excuse me. So to summarize, that first proof is a very weak dalil to use to support the argument. Okay, the second proof that they use is a rationale or a logic that is found amongst the Ahnaf. This is specifically pertains to the Hanafi madhab because they adopt the opinion in the Hanafi madhab that riddah doesn't nullify wudu. And in the Hanafi madhab, they also have a pre-existing rule that doesn't require Islam as a condition or a stipulation for the wudu in and of itself. Okay, so you can see, or you can kind of imagine how they derive this opinion that riddah doesn't nullify wudu, because they say that you don't have to be a Muslim aslan for your wudu to be valid. Okay? And this is the opinion of Al-Kasani that he mentions, that the iman of al-mutawaddi is not a shart of the sihha of the wudu. So it's not a condition for the person performing wudu for them to be a Muslim in our madhab. Therefore, it's permissible, or the wudu of the kafir is accepted in our madhab, and this is the statement of Al-Kasani, the Hanafi scholar. So therefore, if there was a kafir, in a practical sense, and we'll see how this comes into play. Sometimes when we're just reading the theory, it's a little bit hard to imagine why would they say such a thing. Imagine there's somebody who's interested in Islam, okay, a kafir. He comes to the masjid, he's interested in Islam, and he wants to learn about the deen. So some of the brothers, they show him how we do wudu, and he's following along, he's making wudu, but at this point he's still kafir, he's not a Muslim yet. And then after he makes wudu, then 5 minutes later he takes the shahada, he enters into Islam. Is his wudu valid? Now we're about to adn salat al-isha mathalan. Is his wudu that he just made as a kafir valid? Or does now he have to repeat it because while he made it, it wasn't valid? Okay, so just so you can understand the context in which this would be applicable in. Okay? So according to the Hanafi madhab, that their wudu of that person would be valid. They wouldn't have to repeat it because they do not stipulate iman or Islam for the wudu of an individual to be valid. And as far as I'm concerned, this is specifically with regards, because we know from previous lessons that a condition for any amal to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that the person is a Muslim. So I believe this is specific to al-wudu, out of all the amal, specific to al-wudu, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me if I'm mistaken there, but this is what I remember to the best of my memory. So according to the Ahnaf, if somebody who's on wudu apostated and came back to Islam without doing any other nullifier of wudu, they're on wudu and they apostated and they came back to Islam, then he is still upon wudu and he doesn't require to do it again. Okay, which is unlike, like I said, this is a very minority opinion to the Ahnaf, that they do not stipulate iman for wudu to be valid, in contrast to the Jamhur, or the majority of the ulama. Okay, so the next proof they mention is, is what we mentioned in the Rad a little bit earlier, but we'll just repeat it as an independent dalil supporting the second opinion, is that the deeds of one who apostated only becomes void if the person dies in a state of riddah. Okay, so this is their next dalil, and it's a strong one, and we went over it several times already. So they say that the ayat rather, that state the nullification of the a'mal of a kafir or somebody who disbelieves, it's only the case, their deeds are only null and void if they die in a state of riddah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah. فَيَمُتْ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. Okay, the next. So a next dalil for the second opinion is that even if we accept, for argument's sake, let's say for the people that hold the second opinion, so the ulama of the second opinion, they say that even if we accept, for argument's sake, the opinion that riddah nullifies deeds on the spot immediately, okay, even if we say that riddah nullifies deeds on the spot, okay, يحبط العمل immediately when somebody birtad an Islam. They say that what this means is the actual acceptance of the deeds from Allah and the reward for the deeds. Not al-wudu in this dunya, not the actual state or condition that you are in while you're in this life. So what they say is that ihbat al-amal refers to it being worthless in the akhirah, worthless and al-hisab. It has no weight for you in the akhirah. Okay, there's no reward for you there. This is what al-amal means according to them. So they say that if we say that the deeds are null and void immediately upon riddah, okay, it's talking about the reward of it being cancelled out, and not the actual deeds themselves and their physical implications upon the person while he is alive. However, it is, like we just stated before, and we'll reiterate again, it does appear to be the more correct opinion that nullifying of the deed is done only when one dies as a murtad. Okay, not if somebody comes back to Islam. Alright? Then the next dalil that they use, and I want you guys to just pay attention here, we know, so this next dalil that they use is an argument that is used by and stressed or emphasized by Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah. And we know that Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah is one of the Imams of which madhab? Ibn Hazm. Imam of which madhab? Which madhab, ya Ahmad?
I went to a Korean's house to China.
That's not the answer, no. Imam Ibn Hazm is the Imam of which madhab? Zahiriya, na'am. Zahiri madhab, okay? And we know that a very important principle within the Zahiri madhab is what? They reject which type of proof that the rest of the ulama accept. Qiyas, making analogy, okay? So keep this in mind with Ibn Hazm's rad, okay? Ibn Hazm, he says, rahimahullah, that there's something that we both agree on, okay? Meaning himself that holds the second opinion that it doesn't nullify, and the ones that hold the first opinion that it nullifies, okay? He says that there's something that we both parties agree on. And that is that if a Muslim or a Muslimah, they make ghusl shar'i, ghusl min al-janaba, or min al-hayd, okay? They make ghusl from a major impurity. And then after that, they complete their ghusl, they become apostate, they become a murtad. And then they return to Islam. Ibn Hazm says that by ijma' none of the ulama stipulate that their ghusl is batil. Is that clear? Is what the argument? Ibn Hazm rahimahullah is saying that if somebody, a Muslim, he's on janaba, or a Muslimah, she's on janaba or hayd, then they make ghusl to lift the major impurity, hadath akbar. And then after they complete the ghusl, they become an apostate, a murtad. And then they come back to Islam. Okay? Ibn Hazm says, by ijma' al-ulama, none of them stipulate that the ghusl they did is batil. None of the ulama say that they have to repeat the ghusl because their riddah nullified it. Okay? Therefore, he said that if you do not require one to redo their ghusl, which is the major tahara, then why would you require somebody to make the wudoo, which is a minor tahara? You guys get this argument? And why this is unique from Ibn Hazm rahimahullah is, like I said, because he doesn't himself even follow qiyas or hold that. Okay? So he says that there's no proof from the Quran or the Sunnah, strong or weak, nor is there ijma', nor is there any qiyas that riddah, apostasy, is a hadath, a nullifier of tahara, purification. So Ibn Hazm is saying that no one adopts the opinion that the ghusl of janaba becomes nullified due to riddah, so why would you say that al-wudoo becomes nullified due to riddah? Okay? Why would you necessitate somebody to repeat their wudoo when you do not necessitate them to repeat their ghusl? He's saying that there's no consistency, okay? So Ibn Hazm rahimahullah, what he's saying is that he doesn't accept analogy or qiyas as a proof himself. Okay? He doesn't use that in his istidlal on the masail of sharia. And he strongly criticizes also those who use qiyas, alright, of the other ulama or the madhahib. Okay, and here he kind of took a shot at the opponents of the other madhahib. And he says that if you were to adopt that wudoo nullifies with riddah, okay, and you believe in qiyas, then you would also have to say that ghusl nullifies with riddah, which you do not. So he's pretty much saying, since you believe in qiyas, why wouldn't you make qiyas with this? Okay, you guys got his point, is that clear? So al-rajih, the more correct opinion, appears to be what? What do you guys think is the more correct opinion? Does al-riddah nullify wudoo, or does riddah not nullify wudoo? Nullifies? What do you think? Show of hands, does riddah nullify? Allahu a'lam, but it seems to be, Wallahu a'lam, or rajih, that it seems to be more apparent, and obviously it's a khilafi issue, is that riddah doesn't nullify wudoo. Riddah does not nullify wudoo, okay? And the reason for it is because, first and foremost, like we said in many of the durus that we took prior, is that in order for something to nullify what's established bi yaqeen, you need something that is also certain. Okay, wudu is established bi yaqeen. In order to say something nullifies it, you also need something certain and concrete to do so. And we do not have any clear ayah or hadith stating that riddah nullifies wudu. Okay? And there's also no ijma', as Ibn Hazm mentioned, there's no consensus among scholars to say that it does. And there's also no qiyas that ulama can apply to say that riddah nullifies wudu. Okay? So tahara is established by yaqeen, it doesn't get nullified except by clear, concrete, authentic dalil. Okay? And like we said, we went over the ayat that talk about ihbat al-amal, nullifying the deeds, and according to Shafi'i, when taking all the nusus together, the deeds are only nullified if one dies in a state of riddah, and with all the other arguments that were mentioned. A point I want to make that we should highlight here is some of the fuqaha from the Hanbali madhab, they don't even nullify, or they don't even state or mention riddah to be a nullifier of wudu in the kutub, or in their books. Okay? And they actually say that it's pointless to mention that. Okay? And this is from two perspectives. Number one, they say that if the person birtad an al-Islam, he leaves Islam, he becomes apostate, and he remains an apostate, then knowing whether his wudu is intact or not doesn't benefit him, because he doesn't care about wudu anymore, he doesn't care about salah anymore, neither is he going to do any of that. He's not interested in pleasing Allah Ta'ala, wal-'iyadu billah, so it's completely pointless or useless to know whether his wudu is still valid or not. And other scholars, they mention that if he returns back to Islam, if the murtad returns back to Islam, they stipulated that someone entering into Islam needs to make ghusl anyways. Okay? So they say that based off of that, them stipulating that when one enters into Islam they should make ghusl, that it's pointless to mention whether their wudu is nullified or not, because either way they're required to make ghusl. And this, Allahu A'lam, is a weak opinion that states that ghusl is required by the one entering Islam. And if we look at the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, along with the seerah of the Sahaba, we do not see that this was a practice held by them, that when somebody would enter into Islam, they would be commanded to make ghusl upon that. Okay? And inshallah, with this we will conclude this dars. If anyone has any questions pertaining to what we took, feel free to ask. Otherwise, jazakum Allahu khairan for your attentive listening. Wa barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.